All right, welcome back. Once again, we've got another great story. In fact, this one, Al and I, we were actually talking back in the green room here off of the recording, and it just kept drawing on and on and on. And next thing we know, it's like 15, 20 minutes is gone, and we're just still having this conversation. And I'm like, oh, we need to get that recording done because this story, we got to get this story out. Al, man, I appreciate you being on here. I know there's so much stuff that goes on because we've had a lot of conversation offline, on phone calls. I know there's a lot of cool things that you're doing, but let's start with this. For those that don't know, they meet you in an elevator doors close, 30 seconds you got. Who is Al? Who are you?
Well, Al Gettler is a husband to Nancy, a father to MK, Samantha, and Jillian, a pop to Ellie and Freddie and Amira. I'm a person that likes to get things done when I see things need to happen. I typically try to, my mind physically and mentally just starts moving in a direction of let's get it done. I'm a person that loves to laugh. I think you know that, Tim.
Absolutely.
I love to laugh. And I think the biggest thing that I've really called over the years about who I am, I'm a connector. For some reason, I collect people and I connect them. And you need a pipe fixed, I know a guy. You need a roof fixed, I know a guy. You need to retool the entire structure of your corporate organization. I know a gal. So yeah,
a couple of them probably.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I would actually add one more thing in there, and I know, like I said, 30 seconds you can't ever talk about, but I think you've got a creative streak in there, more of an entertainer streak that you've got in there. And again, maybe it comes from the fact of loving to laugh, but I know that you're definitely an entertainer.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I majored in theater in college. I mean, that was the original intent. And we get a little deeper into the story, but I have been an entertainer. I mean, I'll jump right into that. At the age of 8, my brother bought me a ventriloquist dummy for Christmas of 1969. And will mention also the same year the Mets won the World Series. But anyway, I think, I don't know, my brother since passed away, which is one of the real tragedies in my life, but he recognized somehow that I would watch this after school television in the New York City suburbs where we grew up, and that I love ventriloquism and puppets, and I got this dummy for Christmas, and it kind of helped me realize just how much fun I had performing. I was not a shy kid. Sometimes you hear ventriloquists say, "Oh, I was a very shy person," and the dummy, helped me. But no, that wasn't it at all. But I just kind of added a layer to it, and I instantly took to it. Instantly was pretty good at it. And then when I was 12, a guy handed me $20, and I realized, oh, wait, what? I can make money from this, and never look back. And it's so funny how you explore life. I realized years and years later that it was actually Jim Henson and Ralph the Dog on the Jimmy Dean Show. For anybody that's either wants to remember that or wants to look at YouTube and see what that's about. Truly a charming guy, Jimmy Dean was, and Ralph the Dog was one of the earlier Muppets, and that's one of the things that probably turned me into puppets. So.
Yeah. Well, so that's where it's interesting how I see lines of parallel where I've got this line of Lego, and I'm very obviously many people know about the passion of the Lego, and then I see you with the ventriloquism, and you don't realize how deep the rabbit hole is when you start to go down some of these things. And so when I first entered the Lego world, I was like astonished. And then you started telling me about all the differences of the ventriloquism and all these different nuances. And I'm like, that's just as deep and just as complex and just as interesting. And it's really, really cool.
I mean, we're on a headshot right now for recording, but if I move my camera around, to my right are shelves and shelves of things just dedicated to a guy named Edgar Bergen and his dummies, Charlie McCarthy and Mortimer Snerd, which he was a huge, again, if you're too young, look it up. But he was the number one star in America in the 30s and 40s. He had the number one rated radio show. He was in movies, and he had a commercial success selling items with Charlie McCarthy's face on it. And he had a guy, I don't know what happened to him. His name was Walt Disney. And the two of them actually were buddies, and they started figuring out the commercial aspect of selling a character for profit. And that's why I love to study Bergen. But there's all other gamut of we could go on and on.
And I know that you're connected with Jeff Dunham and a whole bunch of other guys that are really famous, and so I get
Jeff
that. But
from the same cloth.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and backtrack a little bit. I mean, that's a longer introduction, but I love that aspect of you. So let's go and start with what we always talk about as far as growing up. what was life like, and what were the narratives that you were taught, or what were the narratives that were exemplified for you throughout your childhood that you thought, this is the way that I'm going to live the rest of my life? And us just start with that part of it. And
Yeah.
where did that begin to, in your development stage, where did that start?
Yeah, that's my mom and dad are both from the Bronx. Actually, dad in North Manhattan first, but then eventually the Bronx. And so the Bronx, New York, is where my family is from. I was the first kid that was born and raised on the other side of the bridge, but felt like I grew up in the Bronx too, because there was always somebody having a birthday, getting married, dying. St. Patrick's Day, we're a big Irish Catholic family, blah, 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 blah. So, I kind of lived bi-coastally, if you will, on the Hudson River. So, but dad worked for the power company of New York City, Con Edison. That's what he did out of the Navy. He's a World War II vet, served on the USS Fulton, the submarine tender. That gave him his talents as an electrician and a machinist, and he went to work for this power company, and that's what he did for his entire career. So that entire career thing is important. But he was also very, very involved in our community. He was a firefighter. He built the Little League field in town with his buddies, first Little League field. He eventually got involved in town. I mean, politics, town government is probably a better way to put it. Planning board, all the way up through then being on the town committee and then being the mayor of our town. And dad was a larger than life kind of guy. He was no angel by any stretch of the imagination. Being a World War II vet, beer and shot guy, and I think he did most of his politicking at the Lodge, which was the bar across the street from the fire station where he was captain. So, but just a loud, funny, always center of attention kind of a guy, and just always fun to be around. My mom was, a kind of a stoic, a little Irish woman, barely 5 foot tall. 5 kids plus my dad she was raising when I was little, and I mean that. And then in 1968, my parents announced that they were having a 6th child. It was the same year my oldest sister Kathy married my brother-in-law Milt, who's since passed away, but she married Milt that same year. My mom danced at her wedding in a very full pink dress, maternity wedding, mother of the bride wedding dress, maternity. I don't know if they even make those anymore, right? But maybe they do. I guess they do. Anyway, my sister was born not long after that, but I will remember the day my sister was born. I was at a swim club in town called The Grove, which is where we all hung out and swam and played baseball and snack bar at the bit. And I called home on the phone. We didn't have cell phones, right? So I called home on the phone and told asked my brother to pick me up, which he did. And he told me that my mother and father were off to the hospital, that my sister was going to be born. And later that evening, I waited for the news, and suddenly the mood of the household dropped dramatically. It became very dark and solemn, and I couldn't figure it out. I remember being 7 years old, yelling and crying, "Tell me what's going on." And it seems tragic then because it was not understood as well as it was. But my sister was born Down syndrome, and it was a surprise. Today you can determine those types of births before they happen, but back then not. And literally the doctor, the doctors at the hospital said my parents had a choice of institutionalizing this little baby or not. And my father said, kind of like, "You son of a bitch, that's my daughter, and we'll raise her." And that's what they did. And so my parents were, so my mom was kind of, not, when I say stoic, I mean, it wasn't touchy feely in my house. Wasn't a lot of "I love yous." Wasn't a lot of big hugs as you walked out the door. But through my sister Colleen, our family transformed, and the center of love and the angel that she was, and neighbors, the church, all kinds of people came in and really helped us understand the gift that we have been given by having Colleen in our life. And here I am, 7 years old, right, with a Down syndrome sister. And remember, the teenage years were not far off, and people staring and pointing and Down syndrome folks were not as integrated in our society as they are today.
Right.
So, it ended with dirty looks back, sometimes words, sometimes, fisticuffs. And, it was just, but my sister knew nothing but love. She was amazing. She was a sweetheart. I mentioned I used to do these shows after I was 12 years old. She was my number one fan. She'd sit in the front and scream out my name in the middle of the show. And, yeah, she was just a delight and really the kind of the center of our family for most of our lives.
So, man, there's a lot of stuff there that we could kind of dig down and unpack and see. And it's interesting because we kind of just touched on a very pivotal component that was both in your life as well as within your family's life, and the fact that you were at 7 at a younger age. Like you said, there wasn't a whole lot of I love yous type stuff, and like you said, very stoic and not a lot of attention in that emotional side. But yet, when your sister comes along, all of a sudden, like the whole world shifts and changes. What? Go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, you just nailed it. I'm shaking my head. Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
I was the baby of the family, right? I mean, I can remember being called the baby, grab the baby, you know, when I was 4 years old, you know, and all of a sudden, you know, my baby status is gone. So, you know, I could have gone to a life of angry jealousy for that matter, you know, but this sweet person who was my sister, you know, just the opposite.
So much to learn from that. So much to learn.
Well, that's my parents' love, Tim, right? Because, you know, my parents, that's how their love came out. You know?
Yeah, but let's start in with the first part of it before your sister arrived, because it sounds like you actually had kind of one concept of the way that your parents were, and then your sister showed up, and then that totally changed the concept of how a family works. So, what was it like before your sister stepped in? What you said there wasn't a lot of connection. There was just.
Oh, I can't. No, not to say there wasn't connection.
Okay.
I mean, my mom was an absolutely wonderful mom.
Okay.
And she kept things moving and light and fun in some respects. There just wasn't a lot of, you know, again, you know, the what we are, the way we are with our daughters, you know, today. You know, there was not that physical. Every time you walked out the door, you got a hug. Remember how much I love you, and you know, we didn't have that. You know, and that's fine. You know. But there was so much fun and love, and my dad certainly kept things interesting. You know, Friday nights when he got paid, he might come home a little late. So I mean, you know, there was that kind of unpredictable aspect of life, and yeah, it was a big, loud household. I had 3 older brothers and an older sister. You know, it was the '60s. You know. It was rebellion. It was, you know, college. It was all these things. My brothers and sisters were much older than me. You know, one's 7 years, but then they go on up to, again, the span of 15, 18 years older than me. So, you know, it was a very active. I was 7 when my sister got married. So you kind of add that up. So my household was always moving, always churning, always. We lived in a small Cape Cod house. The boys were all upstairs in one bedroom. We each had a corner of the room. So here's this little 7-year-old growing up with, you know, men.
Yeah. So if you were to sum it up, like what were the beliefs or what was the foundation of how you believed life was going to be? And maybe it's prior to 7. Maybe it was some of the things that kind of happened through 7, even after your sister was born. But what did you believe life was going to be like?
Oh, I believe life was going to be, you know, looking at my dad, I was going to get a job with a company that was going to be with my whole life and you know, be well established and well taken care of. And, you know, I lived in a nice town, lovely town, you know, where it was transitioning from more of a middle class blue collar to the northern part of our town was starting to build big houses, and that was changing. And I went to school with these kids. And so I was exposed to like my friend Brian's father was president of JCPenney department store. My dad's friend Bill Walsh was the president and CEO of A&P grocery store. You know, and my dad was, you know, was not at that level in his career, but because of his gregarious personality and how much fun he was, because he was a pretty decent poker player, you know, these were his friends. These were the people we hung with. And so I had a very, very unique exposure to lots of different people. And then when Dad got into politics, I was, you know, I kind of laugh about the realities of my family. MK and their wife live in Rhode Island, and MK is a very successful chief marketing officer. Samantha and her husband Sean didn't mean to not mention Natasha, my daughter-in-law. Sean and my son-in-law and Samantha, my daughter, live in South Jersey, and they have our 3 grandchildren. But then 15 years later comes along Jillian, who is, you know, 20 and a junior in college, and I'm Dad 2.0, right? Like, I'm not the same dad I was.
Yeah, so just kind of explain that, because I know people listening, they might be getting confused. Are they your sisters? Are they your brothers? Are they your daughters? Or like, give us a quick structure on that.
Now, I'm coming back to my dad. So those are my daughters, right?
Yes.
Those are my children. MK, Samantha, and Jillian. And so Jillian, I'm 2.0, right? I'm broken in. I'm a dad, right? That's right. So with my dad, when you get to me being 7, my dad was 2.0, and then comes along Colleen, who really changes him on another layer. And then my dad gets even more involved in politics and runs for mayor. And I'm a part of all that, where my siblings are not. I'm going door to door, knocking on doors, handing out flyers, campaigning with my dad. I'm sitting in the back of town meetings. I'm meeting
riding in the parades. Probably
I'm riding in parades. I'm state senators, right. Politicians, whatever, are frequenting us. So I mean, I got to see Dad 2.0 in my life too. Yeah. So it's funny how it just came back around to that. So life was really, really good for me. I grew up in a beautiful suburb in a nice neighborhood. There's no, and having my sister, for some people could be a tragedy. It was not. It was a beautiful, wonderful thing. Initially, it felt like
isn't that interesting about that aspect? Just like you said, you kind of felt the dread in the household, and you were like at 7 running around like, what's going on? And that tragedy, or what would be perceived at that time as a tragedy, actually was the greatest blessing that you could have had, especially for
without
that family.
A doubt. But there's community again, Tim. Right? There's community. Our family doctor, the guy that caught me, introduced my parents to people who had Down syndrome children. It turned out one of my best friends in the 3rd grade, Timmy Gilb, had a Down syndrome brother. It was their firstborn, and he was away at school. He wasn't institutionalized. He was away at a school to help him thrive. Tim's dad was an executive with GAF. I don't know if you remember that company. It's gone now. They used to make slide viewers. Remember that thing, the little thing that spun around, right? So I mean,
Viewmasters.
So Viewmasters. There you go. Yeah. So I mean, and there was a little girl right around the corner from us who became Colleen's best friend, Annie Ward. Yeah. We didn't know any of those things until the whole world was opened up. Yeah. So it's just.
So was that the biggest mindset shift that you could see in your own life, or was there other things that happened that really kind of shifted? I mean, I know you said briefly that it was an expected aspect to just go to work with one company for the rest of your life. That was an expectation, possibly a narrative that was pushed on you. The other thing this is one of the narratives that I see that you're kind of talking about is the fact that the love and the acceptance, that's a very, very true, very positive narrative that was founded even early on. But were there other things that kind of shifted some of the mindset, the perspective of how life was going to take place?
Yeah. I think that, because of Colleen and because of doing shows the way I did and volunteering more to do shows and becoming more of a performer, my mindset went more towards the arts, right? So by the time I get to high school, I'm going to be in school plays, and my high school is a unique place. I tell my kids it's kind of like the show Glee. Both athletics and arts were both emphasized. Even going back to my brothers, my brother Tom was a scholarship wrestler at the University of Hartford in Connecticut, right? But he and my brother Duke, my oldest brother who passed away, they were both in the select choir. They both sang. They both were in the musical Damn Yankees in high school. So that was kind of I got to see them do that stuff. That set literally the stage for me, right? When I got to high school. But then our football coach was also the choir teacher. And when we did the winter musical, the guys were all expected to be there. We were
that's
expected to audition. Yeah. So it just became more and more and more part of my life, where finally, when I got to senior year, and I had no plan. I had zero plan, and then one day I got scared and I went to my guidance counselor and she helped me apply for State College in New Jersey. And that's where I went to college, William Patterson College, now university, and majored in theater, and then I had my mindset on I was going to be an actor, a ventriloquist, show business, but then in high school, I had met a young lady who I dated and continued to date through college. And one of the conversations we had is she was looking for more of a stable lifestyle. That comes around to be a nasty joke in the end, but so I decided that I was going to put that off. And when I graduated, I needed a car after college. My great uncle had left me a big old Ford LTD that died in the parking lot of the place where I went to work, which was a newspaper. I went to work for the newspaper, my hometown paper.
Wait, that's a shift though. That's a big shift.
Huge. That's what I'm saying. This is the shift.
Yeah, because you were arts. arts and theater,
Right.
and then all of a sudden it's like, well, no, I need to do something stable, and so you're like, okay, going back to that. So this is really interesting.
This is a huge shift. But I started saying I needed a car. I needed a car. And I saw the job in the newspaper, at the newspaper, to be in the circulation department and manage carrier boys and girls, in the circulation department. And it came with a car, full-time car. Only had the name of the newspaper on the side of it. So I said, well, I can do this for a few months until I save to buy a car, right? I mean, that's kind of easy,
Yep.
So I enter this newspaper, which is 175,000 daily, 225 on Sunday. Doesn't mean a lot today when compared to web traffic, but back then that was a big newspaper, highly penetrated newspaper in our home county of Bergen County, New Jersey. The family that owned it, the gentleman that ran it, Mac Borg, obviously very wealthy and successful man, and they took an interest in me in almost right out of the gate. Here I was, I started there when I was 22. MK came along very early, not long after that, and so now we had thought we were going to wait a little while to have a family. Suddenly, another paradigm shift. Right now, I've got a child. Nancy,
how you grew up
the girl
really
I dated.
quick.
Yeah.
You grew
Nancy,
up real
the girl
fast.
who I dated. We had this plan. We were going to wait 5 years. Blah blah blah, and that didn't happen. So that's fine. I was saying in our house, man plans and God laughs. So that's fine. We get that. And so anyway, they take an interest in me, and I realized too that this is the media. So it's not disconnected to that vein in me that likes to be part of moving, fasting. I found myself in the newsroom. I found myself in the press room. I found myself all over the building. I had old grouchy guys literally say, "Hey kid, get the hell out of here," because I would hang around, or what are you doing in the photo studio? Get lost, that kind of stuff, and now leave him alone. He's just trying to learn stuff, literally. That's kind of how my life went at the record. And then eventually I got almost an MBA, education, because I started bringing in some people to educate a small group of us that they took an interest in the newspaper. And I'm going to just go ahead and silence that ring so it doesn't happen again. Good old Mr. Outlook. Hold on 1 second, Tim. I'm sorry. There you go. And cut that out. So, there you go. So, I mean, I was so lucky that they took this interest in all of us, and I got a further education, and that led me down the path of, like I said, Nancy wanted stability. The opposite thing happened in our journey. When you wanted to get ahead in the newspaper business, you moved on to the next city and the next city and the next city. Nancy has moved this family 8 times. Wow. We have lived in Jersey, South Jersey, which is almost 2 different states, right outside of Philly. We lived in upstate New York. We lived in Ohio for a decade. We lived in Massachusetts outside of Boston. We were back in New York. We moved to New Hampshire outside of Boston. We moved to Burlington, Vermont, north of Burlington, Vermont, where we live now, and some other short stops in between. So we've moved a bunch. And that was something that neither one of us saw coming. And, I don't think it's been fair to my wife, quite frankly, all these moves. But she's done an amazing job doing that. And, you don't realize it when you get to this point in time, Tim, where, you've given your life to an industry that you loved as much as I do or did love newspapers and the media. And then you get to the stage where I am, where we are all as a society right now, where the party is literally over. It is, I hung on for as long as I possibly could, up until the point where I was even out consulting and helping people build revenue right in your backyard in Michigan, in the UP, So, it just, when I look back on it, would I trade it? Never. I mean, some of the experiences that I had, some of the people that I met, places I got to go, just incredible. I wish it could have been a little different for my family and my wife, but I can't change that. But I think I would have rethought it a little bit.
But there's definitely a lot of good and a lot of positivity that comes out of some of that, even though there was challenges. And I truly believe this in my heart, that each of us go through, whether it's through the family aspect, business aspect, whatever you want to call it. And sometimes it's trauma. Sometimes it's just hard times. Sometimes it's the move where you have to learn something all again. But each of us as individuals, we go through those things, and it's an opportunity to either learn from it, grow from it, or we can allow that situation to make us bitter. And it's good to hear that it sounds like this has been a very positive thing and you've learned through that.
Yeah, I would say it definitely was. I'll bring my mom and dad's community foundation into everything. Everywhere I've ever moved, I've tried to make a difference in the communities that I've lived in. I wasn't a carpetbagger by any stretch of the imagination, even though I didn't always spend more than 7-8 years in a community. But in Ohio, I led the restoration of a 1928 Circa theater. To today, it's still the Midland Theater in Newark, Ohio, is still putting on fantastic shows and is a beautiful $8 million renovation of a theater that's back online that didn't exist before. In the Boston suburbs, I get very involved in Rotary and was president of the Rotary Club, and we did a lot of really fantastic projects. Too numerous to really get into, but
let's do this. Let's do this. Let's focus in on how do you currently live. And what are the things that you do that are your kind of like your base marks, your benchmarks of these are my values and this is what I live by? Because it sounds like this has been a growing experience from the beginning. It's not something, some people's stories, it's like a major shift. Like it's like this one bright light kind of a moment, but yet we've talked about multiple things that have gone down, even starting as early as age 7. And then shifting in your, I would say, late teens, early 20s, and then the moves. And it's like, it's been a constant shift for you. Yeah. So what are the values that you hold dear? What is the core elements that you say, these are my uncompromising beliefs of how I am going to operate my life?
I mean, number one of that is just community. Always has been, building a network of friends, having being part of the community, giving back to the community any way I can. Today, I live in South Hero, Vermont, where I am captain of the fire department. Followed in my dad's footsteps in that way. And I was a late bloomer. I didn't start becoming a firefighter until I was 57 years old because I didn't have the time. Kim Julo, who was the fire chief at the time, Kim was from New Jersey as well, and she kept bugging me to join. And when I left the daily grind of the newspaper, she said, now you can join. And I did. And then she tricked me into becoming an EMT. So here I am with a pager getting up in the middle of the night, but that's what it's all about. Last night, we were all in an RV park where we had automobiles that we were learning how to cut, with those big tools that, people see on the side of the road if they pass an accident sometimes. Yeah. And it's just, so that's a big part of it. And to me, the extension of that is a volunteer fire department can be a very deep part of the community. So we've done a lot of good in the community. We brought during the pandemic, we started a light parade in the holiday season, that continues today, that people literally look forward to year after year. That's the stuff my mom and dad taught me. That's the core of who I am. That's the part I couldn't run away from if I tried, But when you look at my siblings, it's the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it ties in. And this is where I see the web of your life kind of all tying together. And it ties in with the entertainment aspect. It ties in with the fact that I know you, in your heart, you love bringing joy to the audiences, and you've got a bunch of dummies in your office. I'm sure you probably got one sitting next to you. I'm pretty sure you got something there. But
well, I do, and I'll introduce them in a second. But I want to tell you one kind of weird aspect of that because you like to have these come back around stories. So my mom and dad were entranced they loved show business. My dad was a joke teller. He was the MC of everything that ever happened, that I can remember. And my mom had a beautiful singing voice. She just absolutely had a fantastic, the voice that would come out of this little woman was amazing. But they loved watching TV and they loved telling me who the stars were. And they even had what was that? Not almanac, right? They had an almanac. They could look up the birthdays of the actors, and so they loved the show business. They just had a thing for show business. So when I look back too, that kind of fed me that fire, in some aspects too. But yeah, so it led me to ventriloquism. This is not one of my main characters, but he's a great little guy.
Yeah. Hi. How are you? Nice to see you.
This is Tim.
Hi, Tim. How are you? I'm Gadget.
You're Gadget.
Yeah. I'm kind of his assistant.
Yeah, you're my assistant.
Yeah. I keep things moving around here.
Do you lose
Technical
things
stuff, the
sometimes?
microphone.
Is there sometimes when
Huh?
will you lose something for him every once in a while? Is there
Oh,
occasionally when you
sometimes I'm not
misplace things?
exactly totally responsible, but I make it work.
Learning,
Yeah,
we're still learning through that.
I learn things. I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear you're a Lego guy. Is that right?
Yeah, a little bit
Lego.
into Lego. I've got a few of my Lego
Oh,
around here, so I've got my own
oh,
character. So I mean, this is
oh,
as sophisticated as you, but here's my little
oh! Look
guy.
at
So,
that.
yep.
Yeah, look at
So,
that. You're just as weird as Al. That's so cool. Yeah,
yeah, that's very
you're a
true.
weirdo. Yeah, you're a
Very
weirdo.
true. We are definitely two peas in a pod.
Yeah.
All right. Well, why don't you go back to sit down?
All right. See you later, Tim.
See ya.
Bye.
So between all of the fun things that you do there, the fact that you bring in the community, and that's a core value, a part of your narrative, that also leads into what you do. And this is where I love how it ties together because you're acting out of a passion and out of a purpose. So just kind of briefly share with us what it is that you do, because I think this is really important,
Yeah.
and I love what it is you're doing.
Yeah, so when the journey ended in media, right? I mean, I held on as long as I could, and then you and I met during the pandemic, and it was during the pandemic that I transitioned out of it altogether. And I was, let's say I was lost. I didn't know quite what was going to be next. I did some business consulting. I performed even in the pandemic. I was very lucky. I was one of the earliest performers that I know of to get out there and have a steady gig. But it still wasn't the thing, right? I had to find the thing, and through lots of searching, I found a position, and I thought, wow, this just sounds like it's me, So I've gone to work with a nonprofit, which is a new world for me. It's a family foundation, and it's called Community Heart and Soul. And when you dig into what Community Heart and Soul is all about, and when I tell people, what it is that I do, they want, oh my God, that's you. That's so perfect. Well, that's the full circle, right? That's the part that I couldn't have written because my mom and dad taught me the importance of community. The town that you live in, whether you live there for 5 years or 50 years or 100 years, is the most important thing in your life if you make it that. And my mom and dad taught me that the finest way to live in a community is to live in a community, is to get involved, get to know people, make a difference, be on the fire department, like be a scout leader like my mom was, be involved in the Little League like my dad was, all those things that make a difference in a community are really what make me who I am today, the fiber of who I am. And when I look at, we just had a wedding a couple of weeks ago. My godson and my nephew, same guy, Pat, just got married, and the family was together. And I look at my brothers, and I look at my nieces and nephews, and I think I can say this with confidence: we're a good family.
Yeah,
we're a good family. Everybody's making a difference. My niece Kelly is a head nurse at a hospital. Her sister's teaching people with learning disabilities. My daughter Sam teaches or is a programmer for autistic people. Another niece is busy. I mean, they're all. Another niece is a nurse. I mean, my nephew's of construction. And Pat himself, one got his master's degree. And just they're all solid contributors,
So there's one takeaway that I see from your life, something that I would learn, and I'll share this because I love learning from people, and that is this one component is the aspect of how some people will look at what would be considered a tragedy or would be considered a negative, and yet because of community and because of the ability to be able to tie and weave everybody together, there's support there. The other aspect of this is I'm sure that while you were going through some of these challenges, we'll call them that, there's times when you probably sat there and, like you said, you felt lost, or you're like, what the heck am I doing here? Or why is this even happening? You ask those questions, but yet you just said you wouldn't trade any of those times for where you're at now, because those were all learning and growing sessions. Yeah. And now you're in a position where you touch so many different people's lives in many different ways through entertainment and through the fire and through your local community, and then also what you actually do for a job. And let me ask you this: do you find the fulfillment now in all of those things? And again, I know you wouldn't trade it, but what would you see would be your kind of defining moment with all of those things, kind of as you touch in each of those communities?
That's a tough question because I'm blessed that I've had some pretty significant defining moments. But I can tell you about my defining moment is when Thanksgiving is coming here. When people listen to this is not connected to, but we're recording this at a time where Thanksgiving is not that far down the block. Mm-hmm. My defining moment is when I sit around that table and I look at my children and my grandchildren and my beautiful wife, and I say, for as short attention span that I have, and for as crazy as a life it's been, this is a beautiful family, and that's everything to me. When I hear the word "pop" come out of a little voice as they're running out of the minivan to come into the house, that's the defining moment to me. I have not done everything in life perfectly right. I have done a lot of things wrong. I'm probably an extremely hard guy to be married to. In fact, I know I am an extremely hard guy to be married to. So, I'm blessed that I have this wife that gives me the space that I need to be who I am. But when you sit around that table and you look, there's no conflict. We're very diverse. We're very different. And yet we come together and we're a family.
Yeah.
And that's the defining moment.
Yeah, I'll give you this chance, and maybe what we just spoke was that one thing. But I want to give you the opportunity. Is there one thing that you would want somebody to walk away with, something that you've said or something that maybe wasn't said? Take nothing else away from this. You take this one thing. What would that one thing be?
He said he was going to do it. He got it done, and we had fun along the way.
Love that. Absolutely love that.
Well, I mean, and that means so much to me throughout my entire life. Facebook is gets a lot of negative spin. I'm in touch with some of the people that were on my teams over the years, and I think that they would say I hope that they would say that exact thing about me.
Yeah, incredible. So, all right, well, we're coming to the end of our time. We've kind of gone a little bit over. This one's a little bit longer, and that's okay because it's such good stuff. But how can people get in contact with you? And I want to make sure that I want people to understand there's a couple of different things that you do, and I know it sounds like it's diverse, but yet it all comes back to that heart of community. So you've got, what do you do, for a business-wise, and then obviously you have ventriloquism. Give it to me. How can people get in contact with you for any of those aspects?
So for me personally, as an entertainer, I speak on leadership and all that stuff. But primarily, when you go to my website, it's going to be about dummies. It's about ventriloquism, right? It's just algettler.com, ALGETLER.com. And my email address is simply al@algettler.com. The nonprofit that we mentioned and the community work that we do is communityheartandsoul.org, communityheartandsoul.org. Take a look at that. If you are in a town or a small city that's somewhere around 35,000 or less, and you're looking for a way to have a resident-driven planning opportunity to really sit down and discuss what's important to your town. And Tim, this is the most amazing piece about what you're doing. Community Heart and Soul is all about story. It's about hearing a person's story, why they live where they live, and what's important to them. From that, we get all kinds of information, and we help them forward. Yeah.
Love it. And we will put those in the notes. So if you are listening in the car, you might have to go back, take a look at the notes, copy that stuff down. If you're still listening and you actually want to see some of the stuff that you couldn't see, you're going to actually have to go to YouTube because we'll upload the videos there and you'll be able to see Gidget and you'll be able to see my little Lego minifigure. So again, I know those that are listening, you're going to have to, on this one specifically, you're going to have to go to YouTube to be able to see exactly what it was we were talking about at that point.
Yeah. And I think I'll add too, if you can't afford Jeff Dunham, then go to my website.
I love that. So again, Al, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing parts of your story. I know there's so much more in that. Man, huge takeaways on this and the fact of finding value, finding fulfillment, and things that the world tells us we shouldn't be able to, but we do. And I appreciate the transparency and the authenticity that you've shared with us today. For those that are listening again, man, thank you. Make sure you hit that like, hit the subscribe button. I know we've got some drastically different stories that are going on. Yeah, we were just talking earlier, and I find that some people resonate with one more so than another. And so take a look at the differences in our lives and value those diversities. And as you learn and you start to understand that there's value in the differences, it allows you to be able to write and craft the true narrative of your life. So don't stop doing that. Keep going, keep writing. If something, and I know Al is of the same opinion here, his heart is of the same. If something touched you, make sure you reach out to us. Whether you send us an email, contact us, even if you just contact Al directly, I'm good with that. Just make sure you reach out to us because we really love hearing those stories. So until the next story, keep listening, keep writing, and we'll see you guys next time.